Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Liz Schaller. I am the NIMAC manager. I manage kind of the day-to-day operations of the NIMAC, and I'm joined today also by Alexa Miller, who's our NIMAC librarian. I'll let her introduce herself when we get to her section, and also Jeffrey Witt, who is a librarian at APH, and he'll introduce himself during his section as well. We're so happy to be with you all here this afternoon. Our goal is to have a 45-minute session where we go over some core content, walk through some slides, and then leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And also, if we have some time, maybe also an opportunity for a demo so you can see a little bit more about how to use the LUI database if you've never utilized it before. So that is our goal for today. Now, before we jump into the content, we're really interested to know who we have here today. So I just launched a poll to find out kind of what your role is at your organization. So if you could take just a moment to complete this, we'd really love to know more about who we have here today in our audience. If none of these descriptions of your role really fit what you do, please feel free to put in the chat what it is you do at your organization. All right, I'll give maybe another like 10 seconds or so to respond, and we'll take a look at the answers. Seems like we have a pretty good range of folks from what I can tell. All right, I will go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So it looks like our biggest group have kind of product or project manager titles at their publishing companies. We also have customer service folks. Really glad that you're here today. Some production folks. Looks like at least one person whose role involves coordinating accessibility for their team, some curriculum development representation, as well as some directors or founders or presidents. So good mix today. We're so happy to have you all here. All right. So like I said, today's presentation, we're going to start with kind of some general overview information for you, background, especially because no one identified as a NIMAC coordinator. So we're hoping that for a lot of you, this will be new information. We'll pause several times for questions. So feel free to put them in the chat as we go, or when we pause, you are more than welcome to unmute and ask your question out loud. We'll first talk about the NIMAC and NIMUS and basics there. Then we'll switch gears and look at the LUI database and how to search it and utilize it and how to help your customers use it. And then we'll switch gears, talk some about customer assistance and additional resources, and finish that up with the Q&A. With that, I'll do one more quick poll here. We are also very interested in how many folks have some familiarity with the NIMAC already. So our poll question is, how familiar are you with the NIMAC? Very familiar, moderately familiar, slightly familiar, or not familiar? And take just a few more seconds to respond to that, and then we'll take a look at our answers, see where people fall. Okay, and the poll, share the results. So it looks like our biggest group feels that they're slightly familiar with the NIMAC. We do have some folks who feel very or moderately familiar and some who aren't familiar at all. So hopefully Hopefully, we will answer all of your questions. But again, don't hesitate to put them in the chat or save them for our question and answer portion at the end. With that, I will hand it over to Alexa to talk about the NIMAC.
Hi, all. Good afternoon. So glad you could join us. So, just really quickly before we get started, we wanted to thank you not just for coming, but for your organizations for participating in the NIMAC. Our goal here is to provide equal access to the curriculum so students who require accessible formats can not only participate, but succeed in the classroom. So, we just really want to thank you all for helping us accomplish that goal. And if we want to go to the next slide. So we'll get started here talking about some basics about the NIMAC. So the NIMAC is the National Instructional Materials Access Center, and we were created by IDEA 2004 to serve as the source file repository for K through 12 textbooks and core instructional materials. States and districts states and districts that choose to work with the NIMAC require publishers to submit files to us, and these files are then downloaded by accessible media producers as designated by the states to produce accessible formats such as Braille, large print, that kind of thing. And so the goal, like I mentioned earlier, is just to go ahead and expedite accessible format creation so that when a need for a student is identified, the goal being the material that the student needs is already in the NIMAC and can be produced more quickly in the accessible format they require. And next slide. So the NIMAC today, the NIMAC has been in continuous operation since December of 2006. We have received over 84,000 files from more than 200 educational publishers. The files have been downloaded over 57,000 times for use in first-time production of accessible formats. And we are really happy to note that all 50 states, the eligible territories, and the Department of Defense Education Activity have all chosen to work with the NIMAC. And so at this point, you may be wondering what NIMAS files are. So NIMAS files are XML source files. They are the only types of files that the NIMAC can accept, so we can't accept PDFs, EPUBs, any of that. It's just the XML source files. And these files are not distributed directly to students because they are in XML format. They require a lot of human intervention to make usable. And so we don't distribute those directly to students. So who is eligible for NIMAS sourced materials? Our students who use NIMAS sourced materials must have both a qualifying disability under the NLS or the National Library Service and an individualized education plan. At this point, the NIMAC does not serve students with 504 plans. States and districts who work with the NIMAC are legally obligated to require NIMAS from publishers in their textbook adoption contracts and also abide by the eligibility requirements of IDEA that we just discussed, but also the copyright law in the use of NIMAS files. And they are also required to designate and manage a small number of authorized users for their state. And so how the NIMAC supports students, this little graphic is kind of like the life cycle of a NIMAS file. So it starts at the top and we move clockwise. So states and districts require NIMAS in textbook contracts, and then that moves it to publishers creating NIMAS files and submitting them to the NIMAC. Registered NIMAC users log in and download the files. The downloaded files are then used to create Braille and other accessible formats. And then these accessible formats are distributed to qualifying students to use in the classroom. So once Braille or another accessible format has been produced from NIMAS, you might be wondering if additional eligible students can benefit from that format. And the answer to that question is yes. Once produced, accessible formats can be reproduced for distribution. The NIMAS file is not downloaded again as part of the reproduction process. We do encourage our accessible format producers to participate in the LUI database, which Jeffrey is going to talk to you about here in just a couple minutes. We do have one more thing to cover, and that's requests for hard copy books. So as publishers, you may receive requests for hard copy books. Our accessible media producers who produce the Braille and large print that we talked about generally require access to a physical copy of the book or a PDF. And so we may reach out to you, or an accessible media producer may reach out to you to see about getting a copy of this book. In Tennessee this year, they have recently adopted a new Copyright 2026 science program. And so we've been helping our users in Tennessee acquire mostly PDFs because the physical copies of the books aren't ready yet. But they do need those PDFs to make sure, the tables are in the right place and sidebars and things, just so the student gets uh, the same as what their sighted peers would get. And so I think that concludes our NIMAS portion of the presentation. Does anybody have any questions I can answer for you?
Yeah, please do. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute. I'm not seeing any in the chat at the moment, but you did a great job with that kind of quick overview, Alexa. Hopefully folks have just a good kind of basic grasp of what the NIMAC is, what NIMAS is, and how it is all part of this accessible format production process, and how your customers obtain the accessible formats that they need of your material. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and launch our next poll. So, how many folks here have some familiarity with the Louis database? How familiar are you with the Louis database? Very, moderately, slightly, or not at all? Okay, I'll give you just another second to respond. All right. And the poll. So it looks like a vast majority of folks are not familiar with the Louis database, which is, well, I'm very glad you're here today. Jeffrey is going to give you an overview, and I think we should have some time, hopefully at the end here, and he can do a demo as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeffrey.
For those who said they're not very familiar with the Louis database, I empathize because when I started, I did my first search on the Louis database before I got hired to find out what it was, and then ended up landing in a motorcycle shop in Ireland. So that's the other Louis database that's out there, is an EU site that sells motorbikes, which I realized coming to a place that did accessibility, that did not seem to be the right database. But hopefully through this little demonstration here and talk, we'll be able to share some information that would help you when you're dealing with your customers. As Liz said, my name's Jeffrey Witt. I'm a librarian here at the American Pre-Ounce for the Blind, and among my duties is cataloging and maintain titles on the Louis database of accessible materials, which we tend just to shorten to Louis. Louis is named for Louis Braille. Louis is a free service that brings together information in accessible formats from over 50 organizations into one searchable online database. Currently, the database contains information on over 1.1 million books in accessible formats, with the focus largely being on K through 12 materials, including textbooks and recreational readings. Most of those recreational readings are in support of summer reading programs or language art readings that supplement the K through 12 instruction. Formats listed in Louis will include Braille, large print, audio, and a range of digital text formats, which can vary from HTML to EPUBs to Braille refreshable files. Louis also includes information about materials available from Bookshare, Learning Ally, and the aforementioned NIMAC. And once again, Louis is free for both users to search and to peruse, and for organizations to actually participate and list on the Louis database. Who can list on the Louis database is basically controlled by who qualifies as an authorizing entity under Section 121 of the U.S. copyright law. This will be the Chaffee Amendment for those who have looked at copyright law. An authorized entity means that they're a nonprofit organization or a government agency, and their primary mission is to provide specialized services related to the training, education, and adaptive reading or information access needs of blind or persons with disabilities. It wouldn't support somebody who was producing their own self-published books on something like Amazon and just wanted to have another database to put their materials on. It's specifically looking for someone who qualifies under this nonprofit, government, and that the material is directed for the case of education or information access. Louis agencies range from national providers to state agencies to prison Braille programs. Um, in many ways, it coordinates the reporting efforts of these agencies and programs that gives you a central sole space to go to find what's available for the visually impaired. Some of these organizations do have their own websites, but if you ever try to search a title or an ISBN and then look for accessible or Braille tied to it, it's sometimes very difficult to actually land on those websites. So Louis provides that kind of one stop where you can look, feel fairly confident that if it's being done in accessible format, it's there. And as a transcriber or as an agency, you can feel really confident that the education and the teachers and the TVI organizations looking for accessible materials, this is where they're going to start with. Next slide. When it comes to your customers, as I said, Louis is the best place for teachers and administrators to locate accessible formats that are already available, or in the case of Braille, are in the transcription pipeline of over 50 organizations. We do have organizations that will list intentions. This is them declaring that they are in the process of producing a Braille title rather than wait until the Braille title is actually finished. Louis provides contact information for each organization so that the customers can reach out directly to that provider for more information on how to acquire the needed format. Louis is an information database. It's not an e-commerce site. We don't connect directly to the organizations that list on our website. We provide the information of their listings and then their contact information, and we encourage individuals to reach out to those providers to inquire about pricing, shipping, timelines. We do encourage people, if it's being produced by more than one agency, to shop between agencies and just find the right fit for their needs. As far as acquiring accessible formats, the two biggest questions that I often get was what's the cost and how long before I get it. Um, on the cost side of things, it largely depends on the format that someone's looking for and that organization itself. Large print is much quicker as far as a turnaround and also much more, lack of a better word, cheaper to produce than something like Braille with tactical graphics. Um, how many pages, double space, single lines, things like that can really impact costs. But we encourage individuals when they reach out to providers to research, ask questions, shop around, find out what formats work for them, and what is maybe the best way to get what they need to match their needs for their students. As far as costs, APH is a federally funded nonprofit to provide accessible formats, and it may be possible for students to obtain these materials at no charge to the school or the district. Um, Usually when we end up talking to individuals, if they are a student and they are looking for materials, we will often reference them back to their Department of Eds to help them facilitate what's best for their state as far as acquiring materials. In the case of something that APH produces, and we know they can maybe get it on federal quota, which is what we're talking about here is federally funded, we'll also try to get them in contact with the individuals that can help facilitate that conversation with that teacher, TVI, or in some cases, even the parent. Bookshare is also federally funded and provides access to digital formats to qualifying students free of charge. And as I said, we encourage all customers who search the Louis database to contact the provider directly to find out more information when it comes to cost, delivery timelines, and just how long before production materials can be produced. Next slide. As we talked about the national providers, there is Bookshare, which is the world's largest accessible ebook library and makes reading easier for people with reading barriers. They currently have over 1 million titles in audio, audio plus with highlighted text, braille, and other formats. Bookshare, I think, recently updated the way you could browse their catalog, and now they have curated collections, but it's not searchable. So one of the great advantages of having Bookshare on our database is you can search for individual titles and not necessarily have to go through the curated list of like teen titles and then sort through all the teen titles to find a particular title. Learning Ally has been a major provider of audio formats for K through 12 for many years. They have a subscription model to serve students. They are very heavy focused on K through 12. And in most cases, if we cannot find any format as far as hard formats like large print and braille, Learning Ally generally ends up being the go-to for us. And then you have the American Printhouse for the Blind, which, as we said, is here in Louisville. We're the world's largest nonprofit in creating accessible learning experiences through education, workplaces, and independent learning products and services for people who are blind and low vision. Through federal funding, APH produces much of the braille and large print used in K through 12 classrooms in the US, which is a major incentive for other providing organizations to list on Louis because they're listing right next to us. And they know that this is where a lot of education departments, a lot of teachers, and a lot of school administrators are going to go to start to look for materials in the process of trying to fulfill students' need. Here we have a screenshot of what the Louis database would look like if someone just came onto it for the first time. As in continuing with the thought of how ones can help the customer. We do recommend ISBN searching for K through 12 instructional materials. It is generally going to be the best match for finding materials. If anyone's looked at covers of a lot of titles, there can be a lot of different ways to interpret a title or a subtitle. Authors can often be confused with editors, editors with authors. Publishers can sometimes be a little jumbled if it's an imprint. So we do recommend ISBN searching. However, we do note that ISBNs are not foolproof. A lot of times an individual will be looking for a Common Core edition, but the national edition is what has been listed as the ISBN. Also, some administrators are working on ISBNs, which happens to be what the school bought as far part of their educational bundle package. So the book that may be the student looking for is the ISBN that includes the 3-year online homework help, where the book that's actually been transcribed is the National Student Edition hardcover. So we do recommend for anybody to check with their publisher website to try to collect as many ISBNs as possible, because the simple fact is doing as many different variations of that ISBN can kind of narrow down that you in fact do have the right book. If an ISBN isn't provided, our search is a basic keyword search. So one can type in the term math. So they'll get math if it's in the title, they'll get math if it's a subject, they'll get math if it happens to be the publisher's name. Also, same thing with biology or any other sciences. It'll search the entire record. So this is probably the broadest search you can get. But if you don't have an ISBN or you're just looking for a general subject field, you're interested in learning a second language, this would be the way you would actually enter the search. Next slide, Liz. And then you would refine the search. So here we have a picture of a search from Louis. This is just math. I just happened to be highlighting the illustrated math title that showed up here. As you can see, just searching math in the database produced over 9,000 results. For an individual, that's going to be a little bit much to go through. So on the left side, you can see filtering options, which would allow someone to cut it to Braille, which would cut it down to 4,000. And then they can further reduce it even more by just selecting grades and ages. If they happen to be looking for Spanish titles or French titles, they can search by language as well. And one of the things that we have had in this recent edition of Louis, which has been really helpful, is copyright and publication date. We have settings of no later than 5 years, no later than 10 years, and no later than 15 years. For most people who are looking for an ISBN, those aren't as important, but we do have librarians. Like I said, we do have people that look for, I'm just interested in learning a second language. And this allows us to kind of reference books that are more modern versus going back a book that's maybe a little bit out of date especially if you're looking at science books. So if they're just looking for a larger field of books, but not necessarily some particular, this does help narrow that down a little bit. Next slide, Liz. Here we have a kind of a workflow that we generally use when it comes to finding accessible materials on Louis. So there's two tracks here. There's the upper track, which would be the track if you found something on Louis. So this track is kind of what I'm talking about. And the lower track would be, the bottom track would be the track if you were looking at NIMAC. So the first starting point is there an accessible format in Louis? If the answer is yes, that contact information provided in that record would allow the provider to see those details in Louis. And this is kind of the track we'll walk through if we have time for a demo at the end. If it is in Louis, they would contact the provider for a hard copy in Braille or large print. If it's a digital audio contact, they could reach out to Bookshare or Learning Ally. Our website for both Bookshare and Learning Ally basically links straight through to the record itself. That allows you to actually access that record directly, assuming you have a sign-in account, or be able to set up an account with them, but actually having their catalog numbers for all the information you need. If the book isn't in Louis, there is the NIMAC offer down at the bottom, but that's with all the parameters that NIMAC lays out as far as what's an authorizing individual and making sure that you contact the state coordinator, which they would help you with. Next slide. The second question we usually get is how long will it take a customer to receive an accessible format? The timeline will vary. Even if a book is available, which means it has been transcribed and has been proofread, this material still has to be produced. So how many other jobs are before it? It's basically at this point of production. This would be something that the provider would be able to tell the individual directly. If the book is something that is being produced or is in the process of being produced, that timeline can get a little bit longer because not only does that have to be transcribed and formatted, but it also requires proofreading, which can take some time, and then corrections made to it. If it's accessible formats, many times those can be received almost immediately. So if it's an EPUB or if it's a Braille refreshable file, if it's something that APH has, that can be moved straight into cart to shop and then download immediately. Many of our agencies that do list electronic copies, they do either email those directly to individuals or they make arrangements to send a USB drive with those electronic formats to those individuals. As we said, customers should inquire with the provider the timeline for students to receive materials. If it's being provided by more than one customer provider, we would recommend that they would shop among many providers just to find out who can meet their timeline the best. There are instances where we do know that some providers will ship maybe chapters in bunches. So if it's a 27 chapters, maybe they'll ship 3 chapters at a time with the goal of having that student in the classroom having the materials they need on the first day of class. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. So let's pause here for any questions. I know a majority of folks here today are not familiar with Louis, so maybe there are some questions for Jeffrey or for the folks on today.
Hey, so we did have a question in the chat about if the Louis database provides only student-facing content or if it includes educator-facing content as well.
Oh, that's a great question. So we did touch briefly on NIMAC eligibility and noted that in order to receive materials produced from NIMAS files, the students have to have an IEP. So that means the parameters for NIMAS source materials are K through 12 students rather than educators. That isn't to say we do have like the student-facing portions of some teachers' material in the NIMAC. So those materials might be found in Louis. I will also say that some state agencies may produce teachers' materials and make those available on Louis. I think it depends on the regulations around Braille production in their state and what they're allowed to distribute. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, Jeffrey, if you see many teachers' editions in Louis?
There's not a lot of teacher editions, but there are some. There are
Yeah.
teacher editions. It's I think the way that it usually comes across is that they have a teacher who's visually impaired, and the school's purchasing it just like they would for a student. So it's being produced that way. Um, and most of our agencies, if they're producing the material is being produced because there's already an order for it, but then they file it on the Louis database just to make sure that other people know it's available. So even though it's a rare occurrence to have teacher editions out there, it's not unheard of. And as I said, our search is keywords, so you could create a search where you could look for math, and then you could add teacher edition to that search to see if you couldn't nail it down through that way, or you could just try search teacher editions just to see what's on the database. But yeah, there are a few, but that goes back to just that kind of ISBN. If someone's looking for a teacher edition,
Mhm.
it may not be that the agency recognizes the teacher edition, but the ISBN links to a
Mhm.
teacher edition.
Hmm.
For sure. That makes sense. That's what I was thinking of what you said earlier, Jeffrey, is that we've had, we've provided things for specific teachers, but it would be great to like make that more available to more teachers who maybe didn't spend the time to reach out to us or whatever. Okay, that's super interesting. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for the question. Were there any other questions?
That's all there was in the chat, but guys, please feel free to unmute if you have anything.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'll take it over here, talk a little bit about assisting customers, and then I think we should have a minute or two to take a look at the Louis database as well, which will be great. So, as Jeffrey kind of walked you through how Louis works and how you can use it to locate materials, hopefully in most cases, your customer will be able to locate what they need in Louis. And in those instances, they should reach out directly to those providers for more information, as Jeffrey outlined. But if you do need assistance with searching, or your customers need assistance with searching, please don't hesitate to have them reach out to APH. The email address for the team that works on Louis is resource@aph.org. And they have a phone number as well, I think. Alexa will pop those in the chat for you. And I've also included that contact information on the one-page handout that we'll link to here in a little bit and then also distribute to you. So you'll have just a little one pager that includes that contact info as well. So on the screen here, we mentioned kind of that second piece where what if the materials aren't found in Louis? What if they have not already been produced in Braille or large print or digital? There are kind of two different routes, two different places we would point folks to. If your customer is working with students who are visually impaired, who need Braille or large print, we would direct them to the APH trustee directory. Every state has trustees who work with the printing house, and they are the ones who actually would place a new order for a new textbook with APH. So that is the person that they would need to get in touch with to kind of start that process, get that process rolling in their state. For other formats, for digital formats, we would direct folks to the NIMAC State Coordinator Directory, and that QR code is on the screen as well. As Alexa mentioned earlier, every state and territory has a NIMAC State Coordinator, typically at the state education agency level, and they should be familiar with the various channels or organizations that their state utilizes to produce and make available accessible formats, including digital formats, to their students. So the directory is very easy to use. You can just link down to each state. Similarly with the APH trustee directory, you can search it by state. So they're both quite easy to use. Now, when it comes to assisting students who aren't NIMAS eligible, I know Alexa mentioned earlier that students must have both an IEP as well as a qualifying disability to be served by NIMAS sourced materials. If your customer is working with ineligible students, it's possible that they may be able to still purchase some materials on Louis, because not everything in Louis is sourced from a NIMAS file, including Learning Ally audiobooks. They're a great example of that. You can always direct those individuals to their NIMAC state coordinator, and they should, again, be able to point them to the correct resources in their state. And just out of curiosity, got one more poll question for you, because I know we have some folks in the audience who are fielding customer requests. So do you field accessibility requests for students who are not NIMAS eligible? Yes, often, or occasionally, or nope, never have, or I really don't know. All right, and the poll and take a look at the results. So it looks like a few folks here today have fielded either often or occasionally those accessibility requests for students who aren't NIMAS eligible, like students who are on 504 plans, for instance. But then a much bigger portion say no, they never have, or that you're not sure. And that's very fair. I'm curious, anyone who has fielded those requests before, if you're interested in sharing a little bit more about that process and how it works for you when you're fielding accessibility requests for your organization, you are more than welcome to unmute and share. Let's see. I'm seeing one comment in the chat. All right, Martha put a comment in the chat about not being sure if the students who there are needing their accessible formats of their materials have IEPs or not. And that's fair. That might not be part of your request process. And in the next slide, we'll talk about some kind of sample language that you can use with your customer service teams and customers. And we definitely recommend customizing it to what best fits your organization and your policies and procedures. Let's see, Jessica. Oh, Jessica said that we supply PDFs with a signed contract. That does seem like a pretty standard practice. Maybe some other folks here who work on like kind of the customer facing side may do something similar. Well, thank you. Thanks for weighing in on that. So like I said, I think Alexa's going to put a link in the chat for this handout. We came up with just kind of a one pager that we thought would be really useful, not only for you, but to share within your organization. And there are a few sections to it. There are some key terms at the beginning, just key definitions, brief definitions of NIMAC, NIMAS, accessible format, and the LUI database. So you kind of have a grounding in those terms. And then we put together some sample language that you can customize and share with your customers. And it talks a little bit about NIMAS eligibility. It talks about how NIMAS files are used to produce accessible formats that you as a publisher participate in the NIMAC. It provides a link and explanation for how to use the LUI database and what to do if you find the format that you need in LUI or if you are unsuccessful with your search and you need some assistance. And then at the very bottom, we have the contact information for both the NIMAC team, as well as the Louis team, and our phone numbers as well, which you're always more than welcome to share with your customers. We love getting questions and helping assist folks. It's one of our favorite parts of our job. So I will send this handout out when I send out the email notifying folks that the recording from today's session is posted on our website. I will include this handout as an attachment as well. I also wanted to include a few links here in case they're relevant to your work. One is some accessibility guidance that was put together by the National Center on Accessible Digital Educational Materials and Instruction. It's just useful tips for making your digital instructional materials more accessible. And then also wanted to link out to the Benetech Global Certified Accessible program. I don't know if any of the publishers in attendance today are part of that program, but that's another great way to work on the accessibility of your digital instructional materials. And with that, before we hop over to our demo and take questions, I do want to put up on the screen our link to our exit survey. This is very helpful for us, both in terms of making sure that our future trainings align with what you all need. And we also have included a question in there that relates to a case study that we're currently working on around timely delivery of accessible formats. So we would greatly appreciate it. Just take about 1 minute of your time to complete that survey at the end of our meeting today. With that, do we have any questions before we hop over to the demo?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
All right. Great. Well, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. So Jeffrey, feel free to take it away. Oh, you're muted, Jeffrey.
No. So this is the Louis database. Really simple address. It's louis.aph.org. We share the links in the PowerPoint presentation. And like I said, if anyone types in Louis database and then APH Braille large print, they're likely going to get this as one of their top couple results. The first page is just kind of an informational page. We do have some curated searches. As Louis has grown and expanded, we have two audiences. We have the education audience that knows an ISB and are looking for textbooks, but we do have a lot of summer reading. We do get a lot of adults that also come to Louis. So we want to give them something just to kind of start helping them along the way when they're trying to think of what they're looking for. Hobbies and crafts is actually fairly popular with some of the older individuals. Across the top, we have our navigation. So I will go straight to what is Search Louis. I could have searched from where I was, but just chose to go to this. So like I said, it's keyword search. So we'll do math again. So we have the ability here to see different results. Right now it's searching everything that's in the database. Users that come to this site will have the ability to refine it just to search for what is the APH and agencies. So this will drop off those national people like NIMAC, Learning Ally, and Bookshare, or they could search just the materials that APH produces. This would be something that would be useful for teachers and educators who are using federal quota and are using those trustees to order directly. But for the Louis search, like I said, the screenshot I took that was on the PowerPoint was only a week ago. And I think that screenshot, we had 9,382 maybe. So we're now at 9,412. So that means we've added about 50 math books since that screenshot was taken. We generally add titles every single day. So that's always one of those things where if a textbook's not found one day, it could be in less than a year that it is actually being produced. So we always encourage people, if you're not finding what you're looking for, as far as just perusing, come back, constantly stay checked. And like Liz said, we have all of our contact information. We do have an Ask a Librarian page, which I'll hit before I leave this demo. But we do find it, as for us librarians, kind of a challenge when someone's looking for material and they can't find it. to do searches with titles and authors and publishers to see if we can find it, or at the very worst, we can offer an alternative. In a lot of cases, it may be just a difference of editions. So if someone did a large search like this, we have the ability, like I said earlier, to reduce its format, to kind of cut it down. And then we can also further subset its grade to make it a little bit less. So we have the ability to refine our searches down. If somebody is coming with an ISBN, which is generally how most people will actually come to Louis from the educational field, and if they're going to a publisher, my assumption is they probably are particularly looking for a textbook and already kind of have an ISBN in mind. Let me do clear search to make sure I get rid of the Braille. Hit the search again. So here's that just single ISBN. It's coming out with 8 results. 2 of those results are being done from NIMAC, one's from Bookshare. And then we have what is the 2 Braille results. We have a gray box that's saying intention. It shows us a status here that lists its intention. It also shows us the date the intention was submitted. That allows us to know how recently it was started. And then we also have large print. And if I was to look at a full record, what I would get is not only the information about the book, the accessible format information, which if you're a teacher or in the education field, this would help you maybe if you were shopping between sites to know what exactly is the difference between 2 different companies or providers of Braille textbooks. In this case, it's contracted, it's interpoint, double space, and they're using Tiger graphics. And they're also doing another intention, the exact same textbook, but this one, they're only doing single space. So this is telling me that this is probably more pages than this one, but it's in process. Then we have a full view, which a full view just gives a little bit more information. If there was a table and contents we included, we would have it here as well. But it tells them volumes and pages and how many tactile graphics are in the title itself. So generally, we provide enough information that lets somebody be able to look at the titles, figure out, is this going to meet my needs? Or is this the textbook I'm looking for? And then give them the information so they can connect with that agency to start that conversation about getting that book to them for the student's needs. Or at the very least, being aware that something is in process with an intention, knowing that they can be very proactive. They can reach out to this agency and get on that agency's radar as far as like the completion of this title, but also to be able to come back multiple times to look for the title. As far as like just language art books, so I'm just going to do a recreational reading. So I'll just do Star Wars. So recreational reading books function fairly the same way as what you'll see with textbooks, where it's providing the same information. The only difference may be that we do provide maybe a little bit more of a description. We do go to publisher websites and grab your guys' descriptions when they're up there. And the reason we do this for recreational reading is just because usually with ISBNs and textbooks, the teacher knows that's a match. Where with recreational reading, it's more of an inquiry. Someone's just trying to find something to read. We can't necessarily capture what's the difference in just descriptions between editions. So if it was a difference between a 13th and 14th edition science book, we would inform the individual that their best bet is to reach out to publishers to find out what those differences are. But if we have table of contents, sometimes we'll capture that depending if that table of contents was available to us. But the information is generally going to be the same between how we treat both of them. Their searches are going to work exactly the same. As I said, we have this ability to do copyright and publication dates. So if I was looking for a science book, and I want something recent because with science, it's always changing. I don't want to accidentally give a student a book where Pluto's maybe still a planet. I have the option here of cutting it down to 5 years or 10 years. We do get a lot of times with things like geometry where you have a teacher that's working directly with a student. and they don't necessarily have a book that they know that they want. They're not necessarily trying to find a particular textbook. They're just trying to find a textbook that fills the need. So they're looking for the broader subjects. So in this case, they would end up refining it by years or the grade itself. I would say that grades and age ranges are not exact. Sometimes we're producing a book for a fourth grade student, but it can be used by a sixth grade student. So we do encourage wider searches. And like I said, anybody that comes to the website, we fully support it. We have multiple librarians here on site that really do catalog every single day. As I said, we're fairly familiar with the catalog. We enjoy actually doing searches. It kind of is very rewarding when we're able to make that connection between a student or a teacher and actually a textbook. So we do have the Ask a Librarian page. It includes searching tips. We have a series of videos as well that you can find on these search tips. And then we also have an Ask a Librarian page where people can just fill out a quick little form rather than actually send us a full email if they don't want to necessarily open up an email browser. This is very effective for teachers. We do have a lot of TVIs, teachers of the visually impaired, who are in the field, and they will actually usually be reaching out to us either late at night, 9, 10 o'clock, when they're actually brailing stuff from tomorrow's lesson plan, or we catch them driving between students on the phone where there isn't necessarily the ability for them to actually compose a large email. So our Ask a Librarian form has been very helpful for facilitating those little quick conversations, and it's giving us the precise information that allows us to basically do the search and then reach out to them and tell them what we're able to find. I
All
will
right.
touch.
I
You want me
think
to
I
touch?
want to make sure we have a few
Okay.
minutes for questions since we're coming up on the top of the hour. Does anyone have any questions before we head out today? Thank you so much for this demo, Jeffrey. This was really helpful. Um, and like we found out earlier, not very many people were familiar with Louie. So this may be the first time a lot of folks have seen it. So this was really, really great. Let's see. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Um, all right. Oh, are you showing what you all have for in terms of teacher materials? Because that came up earlier.
Yeah, I just did a general search. This is picking up in its titles as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, this is great. All right. Well, like I said, this recording will be made available on our website, and I will send out that email as soon as we clean up those captions, get it posted, and I will also distribute the handout with that kind of sample language for your customers, and a little bit kind of a basic background information for other folks on your team that maybe weren't able to be here today.
And I
All right.
did go ahead and put the exit survey in again, just so it's at the bottom of your chats there. So please do take that for us. We'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexa. I appreciate it. All right. With that, I will go ahead and stop our recording.